These young people barely escaped the grip of death. They are survivors of severe head injury, now the leading killer of those under age 35. The main causes? Automobile accidents, substance abuse, sports injuries. More Americans are disabled by head injuries each year than were killed in Vietnam. They are left with severe brain damage and will need supervision for the rest of their lives.
Come on over.
This is a rehabilitation center in Massachusetts, one of hundreds in the United States.
Okay, try and sit up again. Starting to sink, huh?
Matt has come a long way, but no one can predict if he will ever recover enough to leave.
It's hard. There you go. All right, what I want you to do, Matt, is try and lean forward and lean your elbow down, okay? What word goes with this? Cat and table or dog? Dog, good job. Father and mother, okay. Hot and sun? Cold, there you go. Left and right. Okay, good.
You like Lisa, huh, Kenny? And Kenny. Lisa likes Kenny, too. Doesn't she look nice today? Yeah?
Lisa and Kenny have reached a milestone. They are able to communicate.
Wink. Wink at Lisa. Can you wink, Lisa? No? Have you ever tried? She can't wink. She can smile, though. That's good enough, isn't it?
And keep your eyes on it. Good job. Keep coming. Good. Can you turn your head, too?
Mike's head injury left him in the condition known as locked in. His mind functions, but the only part of his body he can move is his eyes.
And I want you to try to come down to your communication board. Good. Good job. Keep coming. Keep coming, Michael.
Okay, now you can go to your left side. And he's gonna go straight up by your forehead. And look up.
Karen's eyes do not see the clown. She has no awareness of her present and no memory of her past. In 1980, only 5% of the 70,000 victims of severe head injuries survived. Today, advanced medical technology saves 65%. These young survivors are only one part of a community whose numbers are rapidly increasing. A community whose members, like Karen, have all survived coma. Coma is the brain's reaction to a trauma. Normally, our brain allows us to be awake and aware. But when that brain is badly damaged, it stops functioning and enters the state of profound unconsciousness called coma. I'm Ala Awasbeg. This is my brother, Alexander.
We decided to make this film because of our personal experience. In 1980, our mother, Sunny von Bülow, fell into a coma. 2 years ago, our father also fell into a coma after a car accident. Now, both of our parents have no conscious life. They have no awareness of their surroundings and cannot communicate with us. Nothing can really prepare family members to confront this experience. At first, you hope that your loved one will wake up and recover. When that no longer seems possible, you are left with the frustration that nothing can be done because so little is known about it. Our search for a way to understand and accept what happened led us to make this film.
People have spent anywhere from hours to years in coma. And when a person is in that state, no one can tell when and if they will emerge. There is only one certainty. The longer a person remains in deep coma, the greater the damage being done to the brain, and the less likely the chances of a full return to an independent life.
Debbie Price is an example of what can happen for a long-term coma survivor given the best possible rehabilitation care. Debbie has recovered, but not to the point where she can live on her own. Only 1 in 20 head injury survivors receives any rehabilitation at all, so Debbie is one of the lucky few.
a girl and boy married. Look, one, two, three kids. One girl, two kids, three kids. They're both people, and that's it. That's it.
What are you trying to tell me about yourself? Is this a goal that you have for yourself?
Yes, yes.
And what is that goal?
Like a man, you, Debbie and the man.
You'd like to have a husband?
Yeah, that's up. Yes, guys.
Well, instead of referring to that individual as a man, how about I would like to be married?
I know. Nothing here, nothing. Guys.
But why don't you say it
Right.
the way...
I like my man right now.
Deborah, I don't think that's going to fly in Nebraska.
You're bad, God. It's good.
I'm sorry.
Debbie, listen.
You're bad. I have a man.
Well, I think that you could say that you'd like to have a girlfriend and you'd like to be married.
And that's it, that's it. My car's really a bitch.
But you know, it's hard to be married and not be somewhat of an independent person.
I know, it's a hell.
Unless you're going to marry a very wealthy man.
I know, right now. Right now? You.
Debbie's mother, Marilyn Price Spivak, founder and director of the National Head Injury Foundation.
You know, you can read all kinds of things in the literature of what the trauma of loss of a limb will cause, what loss of eyesight will cause, what loss of hearing will cause, what a chronic illness will cause. Put all of this into a mosaic of disability, and can you imagine when you no longer have control over your body, your thought processes, your memory, your judgment, your hearing, your sight, your senses? Put it all together into one mighty, unattractive package, and that's what you have with severe head injury.
Hello, hi. Have a good day to you, all right?
You look very nice.
You're very nice. Have a good day to you, okay? Goodbye. See you later, okay?
11 years ago, Debbie was in a coma for 3 months following a car crash. Today, she lives in a community of her peers at this New Hampshire Head Injury Rehabilitation Center.
What's this?
Milk.
Okay. What's another word for that? It's not really milk.
Milk. Milk.
In my coffee, I put in sugar and
Cream.
cream.
Oh,
Okay. That's what I'd use, I think.
I'm sorry,
That
cream,
would-
sorry.
Mhm.
Ketchup. Butter. God.
Think of the two of them together. And take your time. Now, without writing, let's try it.
I'm
Let's
sorry,
see what we
because
can get.
butter, jelly, butter, cream cheese, no.
On my eggs, I want to put on some...
Salt and pepper.
Okay, good.
Salt and pepper.
Right.
Salt and pepper.
Okay, which is which?
Salt.
No?
Salt and pepper.
Very
That's
good.
it, that's it.
Okay.
Salt and pepper.
Deb's problems are really numerous and diffuse. She had sustained severe brain damage in all different parts of her brain. So cognitively, or how she thinks, is impaired. It changes how she speaks. The part of her brain that is the communications part was damaged pretty severely. So Deb knows in her head what she wants to say, but there's like a short circuit that goes from here to her mouth, so she can't say it, and maybe once she knows what she wants to say, she can't form the motor movements, perhaps, to actually say the words.
Okay, what's this?
Spoon.
Very good. What's this?
Fork.
Very good.
And knife.
Oh, excellent. What's this one?
Napkins.
Okay.
Food.
Well, close. What do you call it?
Eating.
Right. You eat off this, you eat food off
I
this.
know.
But what is this called?
And spoon, knife, fork, and napkins, and plate.
This kind of lifelong rehabilitation care costs between $4 and $7 million, or about $250,000 a year. Right now, the great majority of long-term coma survivors are cared for in nursing homes or by their families. Dr. Yehuda Ben Yashay, director of the head trauma program at New York University.
The person is aware, sometimes dimly and sometimes more clearly, that he or she cannot do what he wants to do and is unable to do it. And of course, this produces frustration. If this is not possible to overcome by means of the known remedial techniques that we have today, because let's be clear about it, the ultimate in rehabilitation is to rewire the brain, and nobody knows yet how to rewire the brain. So what we are really doing is we are troubleshooting around intractable problems.
What kind of soap do you use? Do you have a favorite soap? Detergent?
Yes.
Have you noticed that soap has done a good job on your clothes?
Yes.
Good. I tell you what, Deb, I would get another package while we're here because you're going to do the dark clothes differently, aren't you?
I don't really know,
Well,
Mommy.
just in case, it save yourself a walk over here again. So buy another package.
Both Marilyn and Debbie are frustrated by the enormous effort it takes for Debbie to accomplish what used to be ordinary tasks. Debbie remembers that she once did these tasks without a second thought, and Marilyn remembers the high hopes she had for her daughter's future.
That's good, Deb. You're using your right hand. I'm really pleased to see you doing that. That's hard.
Shoot.
Can you want to...
Wait, please, wait, Mom, please, wait, please.
Okay.
Please.
Bend and stretch, Deborah.
Please.
Oh, I was just...
Yeah, Mari,
I was
please.
just fooling
No,
around
Mari,
with
please,
you.
Mari, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry to have distracted you. That's really good. I know that's hard to do. You know what's going to happen? The blue is going to run onto the white. I think we have enough money to run two loads.
It's all right, Mom.
It really isn't because...
Even the experts cannot tell how far a head-injured person will progress, or at what point the recovery will end. Some parents find hope in the unknown. Usually they are the last to stop believing in the chance that their child will return to a normal life.
No, I don't think this is going to
No,
work,
please,
Dad.
Mommy, please.
I really do think
No, no.
May I make a suggestion?
No,
Let's look at
please,
this.
Mom,
Let's
please,
examine
Mom,
this.
please, Mom.
Wait a minute.
No, goodbye.
You're not going to want me to come again to do
I'm
this
happy,
with
thank
you.
God, thank God.
Deborah,
No,
let me
please.
just, wait a minute. We need to have a discussion. Just listen. Can I have your attention for a moment? Deb, that pink shirt is not going to look very good with royal blue running through it. Are you tuning me out? Deborah, wait a second. Wait a second. Deb, I have to discuss something with you. Deb, you know what? You have two choices here. Deb, can we talk about some choices? Debbie, can we talk about some choices? Deborah.
Dr. Arthur Kaplan, bioethicist, the Hastings Center.
That in looking for the autonomy or the liberty that our society puts great value on. I mean, if Debbie is born in Holland, if Debbie shows up in some other Western European countries, their attitude about dependence versus independence, the value of being an autonomous individual in charge of your own life versus depending on others for help all the time, very different. In American society, the first value that we bring to these kinds of situations is, well, we got to get you independent. We've got to make you autonomous, and if you're not, well, then you're not just as worthwhile as somebody else. But that's a cultural attitude in part. If that's the reality, however, then to work to get those embers of autonomy bursting into flame again is really labor. And I'm not sure we've got the resources and have made the social commitment to trying to do that. We tend to simply say, well, if we've restored them physically, if their life is back, that's all we need to do. We've kind of discharged our obligation. But I think there's a lot more involved if we really are serious about this commitment to freedom, to autonomy, to personal control over one's life. If we're going to do that for people like Debbie, we've got to do a lot more in the way of resource provision than we've done to date.
See, now this royal blue would be wonderful over a white shirt. That's the first lesson in homemaking, Debbie. Don't you remember that?
All right, that's it, that's it.
Well, I don't know. We have to fish out here a little bit.
What are your goals for Debbie?
If you ask Debbie, she's nowhere. She's nowhere. She doesn't see where she's going. We see where she's headed. We see how far she's come. And she, if you make her sit down and talk about it, she realizes she's come a considerable distance. But because she wants to be that wife and mother, and she wants to live independently, and she knows truly that's a dream not attainable, she doesn't think she's anywhere or that she's worthy of anything. I would like Debbie to be able to continue to be in an environment that will foster her own development so that she can function at her optimum level, and I don't think she's reached that yet. I would like her to be able to live in a community-based setting close to her home so that she could have her own life and yet be a part of the family who loves her and whom she loves. And I want her to have a sense of dignity and have her have a choice again. Because two of the things that are taken away from a head-injured person, particularly severely head-injured people, the two things that are taken away are dignity and choices.
The families of coma survivors seek dignity and choices for themselves as well. This is one of 350 support groups nationwide where parents of head injury victims meet to share their problems.
3 years after the accident, she still had a tracheotomy so that he could suction her passageway out in case it filled up with mucus. And he told me how he was out mowing the lawn one day and he heard her coughing, and he felt if he hadn't run in time and suctioned her out, that she probably would have died at that time. At that time, I said to him, I said, you know, my daughter sits up in a chair, she can feed herself, she can talk, she can tell us she has to go to the bathroom. She's probably about 100 times better than yours, and I'm not happy. And I said, I think the next time you hear a cough, don't run in.
A brain-injured person, in order to recapture or regain whatever productivity potential that the person has, must simultaneously solve three very important existential problems, living problems. One is, how do I understand what happened to me and how do I swallow it without choking on it, so to speak? Awareness and understanding of the consequences of the injury is in itself a problem for the head injured person, because what has been impaired is the thinking machine, the brain. So that's one problem. The other problem is, how do I regain my capabilities in terms of problem solving, intellectual abilities? How do I compensate for memory deficits, for attention, concentration problems, and thinking disabilities? In short, how do I bypass intractable problems and yet maintain an ability to solve problems? And the third part is, when all the story is over and everything that could be done was done, I am supposed to accept a different kind of life than I had before, and I have to live with it with dignity. So rehabilitation is the ability to recapture the ability to be productive and to be able to accept gracefully the final result that is less than what was before.
Coma survivor Patty Hogan.
You know, when I was injured, there was very little knowledge about the head injured. And they didn't really know enough. So they put me in a category. With other people. And they labeled me. That I'd never be able to walk, talk, live on my own, or support myself.
I've been up and down this street 100 times, trying to learn to walk again. Watching me right now, I may seem kind of slow. I often have to use a cane. And the speech problem I was left with after the coma makes it hard to understand me most of the time. But what you're seeing right now is one of my biggest victories. I had over 20 operations on my joints and years of rehab therapy to be able to get on this bus and go to work.
Hi, Pat. How you doing? Good. Very good.
It happened when I was 19. I was on a college field trip with 3 friends. It was raining. Our car skidded into a truck. I don't remember the crash or the 5.5 months I spent in coma. The Patty from before the accident, she's gone. The new Patty had to learn to eat, to get dressed, to communicate. I had a lot of fight in me, so I finished college and went on to grad school in the field of social work.
October 3rd, huh? I don't know. You want to take me?
That's Ned. We used to play music together. I was a really good piano player. I don't see much of my other friends from before the accident. For a while, they visited me in the hospital. But now, they're getting on with their own lives, I guess. And quite honestly, I'm trying to get on with my own life, too.
Dr. Frank Sparadio, Patty's neuropsychologist.
Yes, Patty's unique in a lot of different ways. First of all, she's unique because of the fact that she's come as far as she has in view of the seriousness of her illness right from the beginning. As you know, she was in a coma for a long period of time. And most people who are in coma for as long as she was, will usually not recover very well. Not only physically, but also what we call cognitively. And that is, you know, the ability to remember and perceive the world and so on is a little bit distorted in most cases. However, in Patty's case, she's really quite sharp cognitively. She has a little bit of a memory problem, but otherwise quite sharp.
The impact statement has to be mailed.
I was stuck with nowhere to go until Jonathan Houston, a family friend, took the chance and gave me a job.
Yeah, they're not in the file.
We're working helping victims of violent crimes. I'm pretty good at it, I think, but because of budget cutbacks, I'm about to be laid off. I need another job.
When she first came to work with us, there was a time period where the people on the staff really gave her some distance. We all gave her a wide berth. It was almost as though they saw Patty and thought, oh my God, you know, if I touch her or talk to her, I could end up like that. Just the fear of the unknown. She said as time went by, at first the staff was afraid of her, but then as time went by, she's just like everybody else. They just treat her as obnoxiously as they treat the other person sitting next to them. Her only handicap is her communication problem, and I think that alone would cause some frustration. I think that she would be somebody great to work with people with head injuries, just because they can look up and see somebody who has come back, and come back a very, very long way. She's a walking miracle as far as I can see.
You run up against fear in society, you run up against prejudices, while the patient is actually representing a miracle of recovery in physiologic terms, or a miracle of recovery in terms of intellectual hard work of overcoming difficulties, and a miracle in terms of recapturing your sense of identity and a dignity and the ability to live with this problem. Out there, it is not immediately appreciated. Out there, you are a different person, a frightening person in some ways.
Something that gets you kind of angry is the fact that when people are talking with you, they seem to think that you're slow or retarded. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that makes you feel? And you turn around and cry when that happens, when you're alone.
I'm as close to normal as I will ever be, and I have literally nowhere to go. They tell me only about 10% of the people who've come out of coma actually return to work. Getting a job isn't like making yourself learn to walk and talk again. Other people are involved. And the reality is, after 11 years of extensive rehabilitation, there might not be a place for me out there. You know, I don't want to depend on my family forever, but I sure couldn't have made it this far without him. They had told us Pat had irreparable brain damage. One doctor had even made a comment that my father was wasting his money on the machine. And we didn't listen. We didn't listen to that. If we had listened to that, she wouldn't be here. I had had a dream that she was coming out of the coma. She was up in Zamorano Hospital. She was in a room with 3 other people that were terminally ill. And I used to go up every day, too, or as much as I could. And I had a dream that she was answering me. So I went up there and I told her, Patty, I said, I know you can hear me, and I'm going to go through each letter of the alphabet. And when I get to a letter that you want, move your finger, because she would move her finger just a little bit, and the doctor would tell us that's an involuntary muscle movement. But we didn't believe it. But anyway, I went through the letter of the alphabet, and the first letter that I came to that she moved her finger was an H. And then I went through the letter of the alphabet again, A, B, C, D, and when I got to the letter O, she moved her finger again. And then in the very end, she spelled, how's mom? And I ran out of the room and I was crying my eyes out. And I called my father, and I called my mother, and everybody came up. It was just wonderful.
I really felt that once Patty woke up, she'd get up and walk. I really didn't anticipate all the problems that we had with Patty when she woke from this coma.
When the accident happened, I was so young I couldn't really appreciate all the therapy, the rehab, the hours and hours, you know? So while we go on making our big plan of life, she's learning how to walk.
People who don't know Patty, if they're busy or whatnot, they just kind of push her along. You know, they don't have time to listen to her, listen to what she has to say, and take her seriously.
I can understand her perfectly. Just takes it one day at a time. I remember the poster you used to have on your door? Do you still have it? It was a snail, and it said, like, take it one step at a time. Maybe it's slow, but she has a sense of humor about it, too.
Yeah.
She's not like this really morbid thing. She is a hot ticket. I mean, she's a lot of fun. She makes you laugh.
We had all this to say about you, and that's it?
Oh,
My biggest fear with Patty has been the fact that she has been so optimistic and so progressive in her thinking, and she has really worked very hard in getting herself to a certain point, and she's gotten to that point. I'm afraid that she'll lose her optimism. I'm afraid she'll lose her drive. And when she loses that, the biggest thing that I fear is that she'll become depressed, disillusioned, and that would be a terrible, terrible thing for Patty to have to experience. And I think a terrible thing for all of us, not just Patty and the people that have worked with her, but for our society in general. Patty represents someone who really has the kind of drive that everyone admires, and to have that broken by not getting proper employment, by not becoming an integral part of society would be a terrible, terrible thing.
My goal is to work with the head injury in any way whatsoever. But I am being denied. But I'm being denied because of my voice. And I am more knowledgeable with my experience than a lot of the so-called social workers.
They call Patty Hogan a miracle, the kind of miracle a coma victim's family hopes for. But the dream of a full recovery from long-term coma rarely happens.
Next, we're going to share the story of a young woman in the same condition as our parents. Coma survivor Nancy Ellen Jobs remains in a vegetative state after 6.5 years. Her condition has gotten her family embroiled in a legal battle over whether she should live or die. Her case is now before the New Jersey Supreme Court.
The Nancy Jobs case raises substantial questions for all of us. Who has the right to make this decision for Nancy? Her family? The courts? What choice would she make for herself? Our reverence for life in all its forms makes these questions very difficult to answer.
A new right-to-die battle is being waged in Morristown, New Jersey. This is a landmark case because it involves possibly cutting off a feeding tube as opposed to an entire life support system. Nancy Jobs fell into a coma 6 years ago after a car accident. She's been fed through a tube ever since. Her family wants to cut off that tube because they say she stands no chance of recovery.
And we all agree that nobody can get her to respond. And we all believe that she's not there, it's just a shell.
But the Lincoln Park nursing home claims that Miss Jobs is not terminally ill, and the removal of the nutrients it is feeding her would be illegal and immoral.
Terminally ill. She is not in pain, and she is not dying by any definition that anybody has agreed upon to date.
Paul Armstrong, attorney representing the family of Nancy Ellen Jobs, who also represented the parents of Karen Ann Quinlan. What happened to Nancy Ellen? What were the events that led to her current state?
As you know, John and Nancy decided to have their first child. As a matter of fact, she was 4.5 months pregnant when she was involved in an automobile accident. Now, in that accident, she sustained multiple fractures, but was otherwise healthy. As a matter of fact, she was anesthetized twice, at least twice, in order to reset the bones. It became apparent after the passage of time that perhaps the fetus itself had been killed, which indeed it did. And it became necessary to anesthetize Nancy in order to remove it. It was during this operation that, as a result of an anesthetic misadventure, which is what we lawyers call malpractice, Nancy's heart stopped. As a result of that stoppage, there was a lack of oxygen to her brain, which rendered her in the so-called persistent vegetative state, which is characterized, as you know, by a loss of cognitive sapient awareness of self or surroundings. Those areas of the brain responsible for knowing, for loving, for understanding were destroyed.
10,000 people now lie in the mysterious condition called persistent vegetative state, PVS, which will claim 3,000 more next year. Dr. Joanne Lynn, President's Commission, Ethical Problems in Medicine.
The person is an intriguing philosophic and theologic problem
because the person, as they have been historically, is not there. This person has no way to be hurt, no way to be helped. They feel nothing, they think nothing. They have no aspirations, no goals, nothing you can do for them. They are as if dead, but still alive. And it has caused us a great deal of rethinking as to what we mean by being alive. Can you claim rights on behalf of a person like Mrs. Jobs or Karen Quinlan? Is there any way we can make sense of what it would mean to benefit such a person when you could do major surgery without anesthesia in this person? It's an intriguing conundrum, and it came upon us at a time when we were first coming to grips with the legal status of incompetent persons, with the modern miracles of medicine that allow us to do all these wonderful things that all of a sudden we start seeing have downsides and problems and lead to lots of concerns. And in the very first case that came up on the national agenda was such a patient, Karen Quinlan, who for the first time we realized as a nation, I mean, physicians and individual families had been running into this for a while, but the first time that there was this sort of headlines in Newsweek and Time and the attention of the country focused on it was such a patient, a young woman who was pretty and vivacious and involved in life, was suddenly both there and not there, and her parents wanted to see to it that this life was not sustained, and really forced a reexamination of the issues.
Everything that could have gone wrong for Nancy went wrong. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time from the day of the accident. It took a long time for us to accept that there was nothing there. The doctors had to explain to us, the neurologist explained to us her condition and that her brain was basically dead. She has these reflexes. The reflex that she would get on her face and still does occasionally, there's one that's a look of agony. And it's very hard to deal with until we finally could understand that she does not feel as we do. We had a phrase when we were kids. We used to say, there's nobody home upstairs. And that's exactly what Nancy, the condition she's in. There is no intelligence. And so it took us a long time to accept that. We did all the normal things that people tell you to do when someone's in a coma. We had the collage of pictures to help her identify with her previous life, and we had the radio playing. But it's not that kind of a coma. There is no brain matter there to work. It is dead. And so we finally, I guess after we came out of shock, went through a regular mourning process before we were able to finally accept, and then finally decided we would have to pursue what Nancy would want, that we couldn't leave her there for the projected 10 or 20 years.
Dr. Fred Plum, Chief Neurologist, New York Hospital. What am I seeing then if I see tears, a grimace, even what looks like a smile?
Sadly, you're seeing reflex movement and glandular patterns, which are extremely primitive, are ingrained in the species over millions of years of ancestors, non-human, and that now appear as simple reflex responses rather than in association with felt emotions or felt experiences.
How long can that go on?
Oh, that's one of the greatest tragedies. It can go on for years. I think most of the audience will know the sad tale of the Quinlan girl who went over 10 years without any evidence that she ever regained any sense of herself or the world around her. The longest example was a young woman in Florida who went for 37 years from the time of severe brain damage during a minor operation until the time she finally died. During that whole time, there was no sign of the kind of individual, personal humanity that we call thought or self-awareness or consciousness.
So can the body be healthy and the mind gone? And one can still live for years like this?
Look, You can take cells from the skin of my arm and put them in a test tube, and they'll continue to grow for 35 years in serial passage. Is that life? I think life is my self-awareness. It's what I know of the world and what the world knows of me. The marvelous capacity of this collection of cells and wires and chemicals and heat to interchange with other human beings who are as aware of themselves as I am of mine. Lose that, and one loses the person.
Historically, when you were dead, it meant your heart and lungs were not working. But one of the problems in defining death is getting straight the definition from the signs of death. Nobody really thought you were dead when your heart and lungs stopped working. What they meant was, well, those are good signs, perhaps, that the soul is gone from the body. And the way you can tell that is if the heart stopped, if the lungs stopped. Those are criteria for determining whether death has taken place. But the definition probably was when the soul left the body. Today, in the secular world of medicine, there aren't too many people looking for souls, but they have a sense that personhood somehow is connected with the ability of brain activity to be present, that death should be understood not so much as heart and lung function, but when the brain stops working, when it is irreversibly and totally shut down, there's no possibility for personhood. The debate then becomes, well, what are the signs of that? How do we know that's happened? Is it when the person is sort of unconscious, in a coma? Is it when there's no electrical activity from the brain? Is it when there's no reflexes left? So the dispute is about whether we can accurately diagnose the signs and the symptoms of death. We know what death is. I think everybody at this point in time agrees if your brain has stopped and it's irreversible, there's no brain activity, you're dead. The possibility of consciousness and being a person anymore is gone. But the question is, how can we detect the signs that that's happened? We can't sort of look directly at the brain. We've got to go through technology. We've got to go through diagnostic techniques to try and guess, is the brain working or isn't it? That's where we have all these electrical readings and experts arguing about what do these signs and symptoms of brain activity mean, and that's where the controversy is.
The parents and the husband of Nancy Ellen believe she no longer exists as a person, but they never expected to have her personal wishes debated in a public courtroom.
Why are you doing this?
It was Nancy's desire that she wouldn't want to exist like this. It's not for our own convenience. It's because it was Nancy's desire. Now, every human being has the right to determine their own destiny. Right now, she's incompetent, but her expressed desire that she wouldn't want to have her body prolonged in such a manner. We have people on the outside, intruders, who are saying she doesn't have that right because she's a member of society and we're protecting society as a whole. However, I feel that each person has their own right to determine when life is no longer meaningful for them.
Raymond Tierney, the attorney representing the nursing home, argued against her family's request to remove her feeding tube.
There is no question that what they have to do or what they want to do is not easy. And I understand the emotions and the sympathies running in that direction. That's not what really is at stake here. Private decision-making is not at stake here. What's at stake, it seems to me, is whether in 1986 USA we are going to set up standards, whether we're going to set up mores, if you will, which allow the intentional causing or taking of a life. It's that simple. And it seems to me that's the issue that ought to be debated.
The way we argue it is that there is essentially no difference between chemotherapy or dialysis or a respirator, or in this instance, again, a surgically inserted artificial provision of nutrition and hydration in the fast and disciplined locus of the wishes and desires of Nancy. That is, what would Nancy Ellen Jobs want in this circumstance? The law looks The law finds those wishes and attempts to vindicate them. In the lower court decision, the court clearly said that under the Quinlan doctrine, that we could indeed honor the wishes of Nancy and her family.
Why does something that's so uniquely personal, so uniquely private to a family, a decision like this end up in court?
One of the ironies of advancing the constitutional right of privacy in an American courtroom is that you forfeit all familial privacy in order to vindicate the wishes of one's loved one.
The court action was originally a petition to the court asking that Nan be let go. And in our early meetings with the nursing home, it was stipulated that we wanted it non-adversarial. Just before the trials started, they decided to change their mind unilaterally, and it became adversarial.
Oh, the courts are a very bad place to solve these. They aren't basically adversary issues. It's not true that Mr. Jobs and the Lincoln Nursing Home are fighting. You know, it is true that that Mrs. Jobs is in a terrible situation for everyone else, although in her case, not for her. And it is only a construct in terms of, as a way of getting the issue to court, that you have to build it as a legal case, and therefore get everybody having to stake out their claims and fight about it, rather than to have sat down and reasoned together and said, here is the kind of situation we have. We have very few options that look good. Are there any that look at least better than others? And how could we go about making some sense out of the situation?
Why do you think that the nursing home has even become involved in this?
They don't want to be known as killers. There's nothing but a shell there. It's being fed. If she could feed herself, she would. But she can't, and that's the only thing that's keeping her going.
Do you really hope that people in 2 years are not going to know who John Jobs is?
Yes. I don't want to be remembered as being the husband of Nancy Ellen Jobs, except for the good things about it. Not, oh, that poor guy, and, you know, I'm hoping that all of this helps all the other people that are involved and have to go through it and make it a little easier for them, and, you know, a little bit more personal instead of blown out of proportion with the news media, you know, coverage here and there, jabbing at you. I mean, it's just, you get really ticked off after a while. Just get out of my face type, you know, leave me alone.
Virtually every family that I've ever seen with a patient with this sort of brain injury can't ever put the situation to rest. People can't, in fact, walk out on the person or abandon them or get divorces and start a new life or any of that sort of thing. The person is, in a sense, still there. And even though they can't act like a person, they also can't be buried. And so it leaves the family in this limbo.
Seems to me that whether you talk about right to life or right to die or any other subject, society has to make judgments as to are there certain prices that we have to pay just to keep society free, to keep other people from making judgments as to who should come and who should go. We probably, and I've not checked this out, but I'd bet my reputation on it, that we spend more money on dog food than we do in keeping these so-called coma patients alive, or the persistent vegetative state people alive. And it seems to me, as long as we're willing to spend that kind of money on dog food, we at least ought to be willing to pay the price to keep these people alive.
We need some kind of general social discussion and then consensus about what sorts of mechanisms, what sorts of procedures we can put in place. The reason we keep winding up in the courtroom week after week, year after year, is we haven't got any general policy. Are the courts a good place to make them? I doubt it, because in a funny way, what the court is interested in is not so much finding out the truth or what is the best way to deal with these cases. What courts are usually interested in is consistency with previous law and procedure. Did you follow a good procedure to terminate the treatment of someone? I'm firmly convinced in my own mind, and I tell this to physicians who ask, you could probably murder anyone you want in a hospital. You could probably actively euthanize them as long as you could stand up in court and say you went through a good procedural discussion about it. That is, you consulted with committees and you agonized about it and you wrote it down in the chart. The courts are much more comfortable with procedure than they are with substantive resolutions of value questions. So I think what we've got to do is have that substantive debate. Professional societies can do it, the churches can do it, the schools can do it, the universities can do it, medical groups can do it. But they've got to do it and get out in front before we wind up in the courtroom having these kind of continuous tugs of war over who's going to get to pull that plug or not.
It's really like sitting in a funeral home for 6.5 years waiting for the funeral. There is nothing you can do. You try to get through each day, but you can't lead a normal life. John certainly can't lead a normal life, and that's of tremendous concern to us. We have each other, but Nancy was John's life. And so it's waiting for the funeral. You know, a crime was committed against Nancy 6.5 years ago, and she and John have been punished long enough.
What happened to the family of Nancy Ellen Jobs unsettled the community of Morristown, New Jersey. In response, the pastor of a local church, Reverend Vorsheim, took a bold step. He made his community aware of the living will, a directive to family and physician that is legally upheld in 41 states.
The wonderful thing about a living will is that when a person is able to make such a decision as a decision that is intentional on their part, that when the time comes, it relieves the family of having to make that decision for them.
I'm going to take a few moments right now to read you the words of a living will. Death is as much a reality as birth, growth, maturity, and old age. If the time comes when I can no longer take part in decisions for my own future, let this statement stand as an expression of my wishes and directions. If at such time the situation should arise in which there is no reasonable expectation of my recovery from extreme physical or mental disability, I direct that I be allowed to die and not be kept alive by medications, artificial means, or heroic measures. This statement is made after careful consideration and is in accordance with my strong convictions and beliefs. I want the wishes and directions here expressed carried out to the extent permitted by law, insofar as they are not legally enforceable. I hope that those to whom this will is addressed will regard themselves as morally bound by these provisions.
We're perhaps in one of the most unique periods of time. For the first time, we're on the threshold of being able to participate in our own human evolution. And in many ways, the cases that we're dealing with now will seem somewhat sophomoric in the sense of, can anyone seriously question whether or not each of us has a constitutional right to make fundamental treatment decisions while we're dying or permanently comatose? When we move into the realm of actual manipulation of the very stuff of which we're made, the kinds of questions that we'll see within the next decade and into the next century will be much more profound in the sense of how will the law deal with this new wrought scientific and medical ability.
Before we decided to make this film, we were looking for ways to cope with our personal catastrophe. We wanted to know more about coma and its consequences. The struggles of the Debbie Prices and the Patty Hogans moved us. Along with the family of Nancy Ellen Jobs, we had to consider the question of life and death. We've come to have a deeper understanding and a wider view, and we now know that our dilemma is shared by thousands of other families.
Making this film changed everyone who worked on it. The change went from making sure we wear seatbelts and motorcycle helmets to thinking about the meaning of life and death in our own lives. And it raised this basic question: what role should our society play, medically, legally, ethically, in the saving, preserving, and perhaps the ending of individual lives? It's our hope that one day technology will take that giant step and learn how to heal the injured brain. But that's the future and does not change the complex problems we face today.
What do you think about the purpose of this film? Because I know at first you weren't sure that you wanted to do
Yes,
this.
yes. I'm scared, and that's all right, mommy.
I know you
Picture
are.
an arm, sorry, okay, I'm sorry. I don't, I'm scared.
It's hard to see yourself.
I am scared of myself, okay? I'm my heart.
But what do you think this film is going to...
Keep on going, baby.
What did you want to talk about?
Helping
Drinking
each other.
and driving?
Yeah, because came up in my drinking and driving really sick, really aggravated, okay? Drinking and driving the car, oh God, dead. Drinking and driving the car and the van, on motorcycle, it's sick, really sick, really brain damage. Me and Debbie, I am brain damaged.